Hi everyone, thanks for coming.
Really happy to present today and talk to you today about two topics that I'm really passionate about. How can we design experiences that are really effective and feel magical to users? And how can we leverage an emergent technology that is revolutionizing how we do computing, which is generative AI and AI in general. Brief introduction. I've been working in startups and in tech for the past 15 years, mostly in B2B. And I've been at different stages of maturity and life cycle and scale of B2B products. And I've seen the challenges, the approaches of how do we take these products to market, and in particular, how to deal with designing with AI in mind and even with generative AI in a more recent experience that I'll share more about as a case study today. And I've seen these challenges from an industry point of view. So that's a bit of the lens that I bring today of what are the things that that happen out there, how hard it is to not just understand how these technologies can be used to solve specific problems, but also how to sell them and how to communicate about them and how to ensure adoption and all of those challenges that we have when we're building new products. So I'll start by discussing a bit the acceleration of the AI timeline. A lot of things have been happening recently, but AI has been used in the industry for a while now. We called it different things: machine learning, AI, algorithms. The type of machine learning models that were applied successfully 10, 15 years ago were those that were much more small in scale and really focused to specific tasks. So this could be sentiment analysis, this could be image recognition, character detection, recognizing a license plate, this type of applications of a technology that is built on statistics, but essentially what it does is pattern recognition. And initially it was just something quirky. Oh, can tell you if it's a dog or a cat that you're showing it as a picture. But we figured out what were problems, what were use cases where this could be leveraged to do things that humans would take longer to do and that could be automated. And that can be credit card scoring, that can be financial crime detection and stuff like that. But it can also be simply automating classification of a piece of text and saying, this customer is angry or this customer is happy, and just do that in an automated basis. That was the start, and we were leveraging this type of AI for some time. But then something happened in 2015. Google came out with the transformer model paper. So it's basically a breakthrough from a technological point of view for language models. And what it brings is the ability for you to really scale the quality, the size, the training, and also the speed at which these models get ready. It also introduces some technical differences into how they look at a bigger picture, so they have more context to operate with, and they understand references within a body of text. So this was when chatbots started getting better, essentially, but they were still not that great in 2015 compared to where we are today. What happened was that this unlocked the capability to continuously scale these models. That's why we call them today large language models when we talk about generative AI, because we added more layers, we added more data, we added more nodes, we just made them massive. And what surprised us was, well, we can just continue to throw this at them, throw more things, and they just get better in terms of quality. And they get to this point where it surpasses the human level benchmark for certain tasks, the average benchmark. for certain specific tasks. But that's quite something. If you think about it, it's kind of like passing the Turing test, especially for conversation, for language reasoning, and this type of activities, but for a range of them. And from that moment onwards, what we've been seeing is a consolidation of the foundational layer. So the large language models that are provided by OpenAI, by Anthropic, and others. And on top of those, there is now a possibility for new experiences to be built, new startups to be created, new products to be launched, leveraging that as a new foundation, a new way of computing. So to give a sense of what we talk about when we talk about superhuman performance or above human performance, and this is already not up to date, this is from last year, but it's the more relevant set of benchmarks that's usually quoted. We see image recognition, speech recognition, predictive reasoning, reading comprehension, language understanding, handwriting recognition. Also, predictive reasoning, when this was published, was still below the benchmark. I think with the new GPT Mini 1 model that's trained specifically in logical reasoning type of activities, it might be performing better there, I think, from their own benchmarks. But essentially, it's across a variety of things. And then the same technologies start to be applied to different models. We'll talk mostly about large language models today, but we also see an explosion in terms of multimodal capabilities, generating video, generating images, etc. Speech as well. The articulation of all of those, still flaky, but this is continuously evolving in the past few years. Actually, in the past 2 years, it's evolved tremendously. It also raises some interesting questions from a philosophical point of view. Alan Turing introduced the Turing test in the 50s when he published about Can Computers Think? A bit of a thought-provoking exercise of how do you measure intelligence? How do you measure an entity's ability to perform an intelligent activity? And he came up with this abstract idea of like, okay, if a person is talking to the machine in a way that it doesn't know if it's a machine or not, then once a machine can achieve a level of reasoning that can convince you that it's human, that is intelligence. And that was one definition of intelligence. Over the years, this has been a topic that AI researchers, philosophers, sci-fi authors have really looked into and they're very curious about. Similar to the Turing test in Blade Runner, we had the Voigt-Kampff's test, where it was more focused not so much in intelligence, but more in physiological and emotional response testing. That was the concept. Of course, it's a fictional test. And of course, we've been filling captchas for the past 10 years or so to prove that we are actually humans and not robots. And it's a whole question if the captchas are still valid these days. They're probably trying to test different things than asking you how many giraffes can you see in a certain set of pictures now that the AI can do that. But something that I found really interesting that popped up around GPT-4, I believe, was this website, this app, Human or Not, where you would get paired with another player and you would play a game of trying to guess if it's a human or not after, I think it was 1 minute of conversation. So the humans were all trying to make the other humans guess wrong. And there were some bots in the mix also trying to come across as human. And then you would also try to make the other guy think that you're actually a bot and not human. So it was quite interesting, this adversarial mix. But what I found also curious is the results. So we do have still the ability to guess this more right than wrong, but still people were often assuming they were talking to bots when they were talking with humans, 1 in 4 approximately, and 2 in 5 thinking that it was a human when it was actually a bot. So quite interesting that we're surprisingly not as good at this as we might think that we are. And this brings me to this quote. intelligence is whatever machines haven't done yet. This is a concept from 1970, actually, but when you look at it, it's something that you can replace intelligence with technology, or machines with technology, I mean, but it's this, what's the essence of being human? What's this thing that makes us different? And you can replace intelligence with creativity, perhaps. People often say, oh, but ChatGPT, LLMs, they cannot really create, or the content doesn't have spark. And it all comes down to, are you using it well? Aren't there some biases at play about our own exceptionalism as humans? And I really think this is interesting. And of course, I placed there a picture of chess pieces, because the same thing happened in '96 when Deep Blue beat Kasparov, and chess started losing a bit of popularity. It was no longer the ultimate measure of intelligence or humanness, if you will. And I feel like now we're trying to elevate creativity or some abstract form of taste to that human level, but we'll always move the goalposts as the machines get better. Another way to look at how things are changing and how this is fundamentally a paradigm shift is also the speed of adoption of this technology. Most people state that they are actually aware of the existence of ChatGPT, at least in Denmark and the USA, 1/3 of the people, which is quite significant when you look at other types of technologies. Not a lot of them use it on a daily or weekly basis, but there is already an interesting baseline for something that is 2 years old, right? And when you try to see, there isn't a lot of discrepancy across countries in different continents. It's more or less actually uniform. So global adoption in 2 years and widespread awareness that this thing exists. And when you look at, okay, the speed of adoption, the speed of the spread of a new technology, it took 10 years for Netflix to reach 1 million users. It took 1 year, less than 1 year for Facebook. Half of that for Spotify, few months for Instagram. ChatGPT brought this down to days. So it's order of magnitude scaling that we're talking about, the speed up that we're talking about. Just a couple of months ago, there was another fundraise into OpenAI. The valuation is now above $150 billion, almost doubled from where it was at. We can discuss if this is highly speculative or not, if we'll talk a bit about the limits of scaling. But to put it in context, Microsoft took 20 years to grow to that size comparatively. And we're talking about a company that it's been around for longer. It was not an overnight success. It took a number of years until ChatGPT was released. But the product appeared in the past 2 years, right? And then the whole economic ecosystem around generative AI and training LLMs and all the computation power, the chips, the GPUs, everything that goes into that. It's a crazy scaling graphs that we see. NVIDIA completely smoked Intel, who they've been quite close, actually Intel led for a number of years, for a number of periods, for decades. And now suddenly NVIDIA completely smoked them with a growth that's unheard of 2,000% in 5 years. And they're not able to actually keep up with the demand right now. They cannot produce GPUs at the speed that Microsoft and Amazon and all the giants investing in these LLM foundational models want to actually acquire them. Even VCs are starting to stash their own GPUs to fund generative AI LLM projects. So there probably will be changes there because the chip technology typically goes in cycles. So there eventually will be a breakthrough that will speed those things at that foundational level, the hardware level that supports the foundational models. But it's already an impressive acceleration in growth and scale that we're talking about. And in just a couple of years, the number of AI startups exploded. So we do have the foundational layer that I was talking about with foundational model providers over there. But then we also have all these other supporting functions and just startups that play into that. The hardware we just talked about down there. Then on top, you have some that are more general productivity, like ChatGPT, but also a number of industry vertical startups and niche applications. And although a lot of the attention is captured by the foundational models and by these companies and the drama at OpenAI and all the things that go on there and all the absurd levels of funding and valuation that we're talking about, there is still a good chunk of investment that goes not to the foundational layer, but to AI startups in general, startups that are just like looking to build things either supporting that or at the vertical applicational layer. Another interesting reaction to this technology from Bill Gates himself, he compared it to his reaction when he saw the graphical user interface. And what I find super interesting about this is when he saw the graphical user interface was when essentially he eventually made the move into Windows, and we left command-based DOS-like systems, and we moved into the graphical user interface systems we all know today and have known for 30, 40 years or so. So it's super interesting that he compares this as revolutionary as that, because it really reinforces the idea of we're looking at a complete platform shift on one hand, and also a paradigm shift in terms of user-computer interaction, a different way for humans and computers to interact. And the interesting thing is we're only used to interact using language with ourselves. Like that is the whole interesting point about how the Turing test also comes around, like, oh, we can talk to a machine and it understands. It's something really, really interesting. And unlike what we've always experienced, precise outputs and very strict and brittle inputs. And when you think about it, the whole evolution of the graphical interface is to create more flexibility on that. If I don't write the instruction exactly correct, it doesn't fall apart. I have some grace built into the usability of a graphical interface, and that's everything the user experience has been working on for the past 20 years. When you look at talking to a computer, so you suddenly have a medium that is much less brittle, that is much less easy to break. Its words, they're more flexible, they're more malleable. And it kind of actually understands and then produces something back. But now it's not a precise output. Now it makes mistakes. And that's really surprising, which we're exchanging one for the other. And that's a really interesting way to look at it as well. So fundamentally, when we talk about paradigm shifts, when we talk about moving to a different underlying platform for building stuff, we are talking about the typical emergent technology S-shaped adoption curves, where first it's clunky, it gets more usable, eventually it's mainstream. And a lot of technology in the past has followed this. It starts as an emerging new thing, and eventually it becomes boring and old and mainstream, and something else comes and disrupts it. We had mainframes, then we had computers, personal computers were amazing. You can actually have a computer at home, then you had laptops, then you had the web, then you had the mobile revolution. A super interesting story is when Spotify realized that most of their traffic was starting to come from mobile phones, and they had most of their tech staff were desktop web developers, and they had to start looking into how do we shift this quickly, because we're going into mobile and we cannot continuously serve where the people are going. We've been talking about cloud migrations for I think 10 years or more now, and they're still not done, most of them. And now we get to this new interesting technology, emerging technology that enables a different way of interacting. That's generative AI. This is one of my favorite quotes as well. The future is already here, not evenly distributed. I regularly use a parking lot in Lisbon, close to my office, where I have a subscription, and it's associated with my license plate. And I find it delightful since I've been using this. I just drive in, it detects my car, it knows who I am, opens the gate, I go in, I park. When I come out, does the same thing. If I stayed more than I'm supposed to, it charges me an extra. I get the notification on my phone. Beautiful. This technology is 15 years old, but it hadn't been delivered and integrated properly right away. It had time. It needed time to mature. The use case needed time to mature. How it applies to it, the need for the integration with the mobile capability as well. But there's a bunch of parking lots still today where you don't have this. And some have kind of a halfway compromise where you still have to get a ticket, and maybe you hurt your arm to get the ticket, but then it already read your plate, so now it associates the ticket with the plate. So if you paid the ticket, you can just exit with the plate. So at least it's half the problem, only getting the ticket, but you don't need to keep it, or although it's quite confusing because you never know, and then you keep the ticket, and then, yeah, it's not perfect. Point is, even with things that have been around for 10, 20 years, they're not massively adopted or applied to all use cases or in all situations. And that goes back to the point of the talk. There's a lot of opportunity to design really thoughtful experiences using this technology, because it has not permeated everywhere. A lot of people don't know what to do with ChatGPT, for a starter, as users. Much less people probably know what to do with it as a tool to build things. So lots of opportunity there. The money is not all going to the foundational layer. There are possibilities at the application layer, at the everyday problems that we see, where we can apply this to solve those in a very different way and build solutions that are very different from what we are used to and know. Another important thing is there's a question mark of how this graph will look as with time in terms of the vertical axis. So basically, the vertical axis here is measuring quality, and the horizontal is measuring price. So the costs are going down, essentially. GPT did this journey of you're continuously bringing costs down, but then you're also sometimes trying to figure out this trade-off between cost and quality, right? So they start there. Turbo is much cheaper. Then we have 4.0, and 4.0 gets better. Then 4.0 Mini is even cheaper, but not as high quality. Then 0.1 Preview, it's pricey, but quality is different. And I'll talk about this more ahead, but the basic idea is there are a lot of options here to play with. You might have use cases where you can use something that is not as high quality type of model that you will use, but that you can make more calls to it, or you can have situations where what you care is not so much this trade-off, but maybe the ability to use it on device versus to make a call. And also there are options with what Facebook Meta is doing with Llama, where they're democratizing access and also allowing you to do it in hosting, self-hosting, a version of this that is not as high quality as perhaps what OpenAI and Anthropic are producing, but that approximates it at a nice trade-off. Fundamentally, this creates opportunities for new markets. So this ties into the innovator's dilemma and the core thesis of when you want to do 10x type of innovation, a 10x type of experience, you need to think differently. You need to approach things from a different perspective, but you might get this high reward of you create a new market for yourself. You're the only one, you're the leading category in that area. So if you look at any vertical where some SaaS company or a bunch of them are trying to solve something very specific in a workflow for a specific typical department, this type of B2B stuff, I will bet that there is space to do that in a completely different way with generative AI, and if nobody is doing it, it's worth having a look. Probably a lot of people are already doing it, but perhaps failing. When we talk about creating new markets, what we're saying is essentially the boundaries of the existing industries are being altered by generative AI, by this new capability. And this creates that opportunity of approaching the market with a blue ocean strategy, with trying to lead through innovation, through disruption, of breaking whatever value cost trade-off people were used to. In order to provide this service, we need to spend this, or we need to use this amount of people, or we need to do these things in this way or in this sequence. And what this technology does is brings you the option to, maybe we don't need to do that exactly like that. Maybe there's another way that half of that workload can go into the AI, or maybe humans with AI can do that 10 times faster. And I'll show you an example exactly of what that looks like later on.
There was an article in Scientific American in the early 70s which compared the efficiency of locomotion for various species of things on the planet. They measured how much energy it took for a bird to get from point A to point B compared with the energy it took a fish to get the same distance, and goat, a person, all sorts of other things. And they ranked them. And it turns out the condor won. Condor was the most efficient, and man came in with a rather unimpressive showing about a third of the way down the list. It's somewhat disappointing. But someone there had the insight to test the efficiency of man riding a bicycle. And man riding a bicycle was twice as good as the condor, all the way out the end of the list. And what it really illustrated was man's ability as a tool maker to fashion a tool that can amplify an inherent ability that he has. And that's exactly what we think we're doing. We think we're basically fashioning a 21st century bicycle here, which can amplify an inherent intellectual ability that man has and really take care of a lot of drudgery to free people to do much more creative work.
So that's Steve Jobs talking about the bicycles of the mind that he was comparing the Apple II to as they were launching it. So it was an innovative new computer, and that's how he framed it. So my challenge, and if you take something from just one thing from this talk, would be what would be possible. How might you use generative AI to build bicycles of the mind for whatever you're passionate about, for whatever your area is, for whatever industry or vertical you care about? Let's move into specific applications. So, okay, it's amazing. It has all these signals that there's something exceptional going on. But how do we make it work? So what? So here's one interesting data point that has been floating around LinkedIn for the past weeks. Somebody tried to compare. It's a bit apples and oranges, but kind of fair. How much queries are going through Google, YouTube, other search engines, and ChatGPT? So how much are people asking stuff just prompting ChatGPT? And if you compare that to a Google search, what does that look like? Google is still king, but that pie looked a bit different 2 years ago, right? And I think an interesting fact is Microsoft had 2% of search with Bing, and now it has 6% of search if you consider ChatGPT as Microsoft's investment, right? So it starts to change things. People are starting to get information from this directly, from the GPTs, from the chatbot interfaces, this general productivity applications. Is it the right use case?
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I'm just thinking the future of the searching will be the AI will be the combination of all of these all in one system. So for instance, you want to search for how to cook. You're doing it in Google. Now imagine you have an AI system which can show you, which can tell you how to do it, like all together.
But you already have it today. So let's say you want to figure out how to cook Portuguese Christmas dinner.
How do you do it by the ChatGPT or
ask ChatGPT, it will tell you. And then
what does it show you?
I don't know. It will likely show you if you
show you the links or videos.
Exactly. If you ask him to give you YouTube links, he'll probably find some things.
Yeah.
And if it's not yet completely, it will. And if it's not doing it, I can tell you Perplexity, which is basically a search engine mixed with an LLM, is doing it. And they're trying to work on the problems of hallucinations and trying to link to the sources for information. But essentially, does it work for search? It depends of what type of output you expect. So if you want precision, maybe you need to reframe a bit your understanding of what this thing is doing, right? It's doing statistical inference. It's generating something that looks plausible. It's not necessarily finding you facts. And as I was saying, some companies and products, what they're building is layers of robustness and counterbalances on that.
Sorry, can I just add?
Yes.
There is an issue with relevance. And for me, for example, I use more than 50% of my search now on Copilot. So what I do is that I don't trust Google anymore to show you the best results. It's not that I don't show results, but to show you the best results is to have relevance for what I'm asking. I trust the
Copilot more.
Copilot more in order to understand
Although
my answer.
And that's super interesting because with Google, if you understand the Google ranking algorithm, you know that it's ranking the content that's most linked on the web. So there is a very objective function that it's pursuing and that you can trust the logic of that function. With an LLM, you don't know exactly what it's doing, but you already trust it more based on the outputs. And it can be because of the quality of the outputs, or it can be because of the experience is better as well, and that also might influence.
So the source.
The sources.
For me, the source of the importance when I see the output, I generally look at the source.
Yeah.
So I understand how this is well done.
For me personally, I know that I really value the back and forth. Also. Being able to say, no, that's not what I want. This is more what I want.
Also.
And fine tuning. You don't have that in Google. And suddenly you have a sparring partner and you're not just searching for stuff and trying to put it together all in your head. You're almost using a machine that can talk back to you. That's what it is.
What is that? Old fashioned?
No, I mean, Google is investing in this as well. It's a race.
So it's an integration of tools.
Yeah.
You can see a lot of information that derives, for example, from included.
Yeah.
Some ChatGPT, not the ones. So you have to talk to the machine until we get to a picture of that. We get they should break that AI. In my point of view, it's like all like
But they are doing it. They are doing it with Germany and they had some flops at the start. So they were integrated into the Google search bar experience, and they got some hallucinations and reactions there that it wasn't ready, and then they had to back down a bit. But they're really pursuing it on the enterprise Google Workspace angle for sure, with like helping you answer emails, etc. It's happening already.
About the browser, but I read the news. They're saying that the United States say that they're forcing you to start the browser. Do you have an idea?
It's not in the scope of the talk, but it's something that's being discussed with regulators, and it's more of an antitrust monopoly thing. So, yeah. So use cases. So this is a mapping from VCs, from Sequoia Capital, where they're showing you like, if you start from your typical KPIs, you have profit, revenue, expenses, and you start looking at what contributes to revenue, what contributes to expenses, you'll find use cases. Customer service, every type of support, it's something where it's really obvious to plug this. The same for figuring out who to pursue in terms of bringing customers in, optimizing paid ads, optimizing retention, optimizing how you activate customers. All of these things are suitable. All of these are about communicating with customers, either to keep them in or to make them or to incentivize them to come in or to spend more. So these are natural points to enter. But there are also companies just looking at it from a cost savings angle as well. Klarna invested in setting up an AI task force, an AI department to set up to improve their customer service area, and they claim that they have 40 million in improvements on profit, and that 2/3 of the chats with customer service are now fully supported by AI. Had other stories of ServiceNow was into workflow automations, and they claimed that they reduced productivity gains equivalent to 50 people whose work was somehow automated or improved in their velocity. And you see this across support, HR, and software engineering. So there are multiple places where to find gains and where to apply them. This was something that was important for me, and you'll understand a bit later on when I talk about the specific case study I bring today, because I was working in the space of sales and tools for salespeople, and this is what Gartner was telling at the time, that this is how they see the future of the sales role evolving. So you have all this stuff that goes on, and suddenly they have a quarter of their time freed up for other things, either to pursue even more deals or to do other types of activities to generate pipeline. And that's all driven mostly from these activities being simplified and accelerated. But also you see a drop of 50% of the non-selling activities, all the admin stuff that salespeople hate to do with contracts and updating Salesforce and whatnot. It should be done by machines. So their prediction was also that by 2025, a third of the chief revenue officers will prepare to have a generative AI operations team. So a team dedicated to how do you deploy Gen AI into the organization? How do you hack these tools together in order to make your go-to-market, your sales teams, your success teams more efficient? So that even brings not just the idea of new roles, but whole new teams, whole new functions inside the organization. And then as a product manager, I'm also super curious of how this impacts product management. And they have some hot takes on Twitter of like all the PRDs will be written by machines, or the PMs will instead of having a lot of engineers, they'll have a lot of tabs with ChatGPT just doing things for them. So that's more on the ironic, funny side, but there are a number of things that are indeed being improved like this. And even if you're doing a lonely task of researching a specific topic, engaging with GPT helps you at least not feel lonely about the task, even if the outputs are not that good. It all at least is a really, for me, interesting approach to just spar with the machine and check my reasoning about something. So we talked a bit about potential applications. We talked about the trends. How do we actually go about building it? How do we actually go about, what are the challenges when we are trying to design a new product using this type of technology? One way to think about it, and why I talk about designing magical experiences or designing magical products with emerging technology or with generative AI, is because I really believe in this idea that the technology itself is not what matters. What matters is the experience. And if the experience feels magical, that's when you know that, okay, this is a success. I happen to understand how my license plate is being recognized and why I can drive in and out and the camera sees it. But after some time, it's even no longer as magical as it used to be. But it's that experience, and it's that specifically, it's the delta, it's the contrast to having to take the damn ticket from the machine. If you think about it, this is also embodied by some startup wisdom of a new experience that drives people to change behavior should always be 10x better than the previous experience. And often Uber is quoted as an example for that. It's 10 times better to just ask for it on your phone, see the car arrive, than trying to flag a cab in the middle of the city. It might be more or less the same time if you go and compare them, but it feels so much easier and simpler, and you control the whole thing kind of as well when you do it in the other way. But let's talk about actual specific challenges. So this image was generated by that prompt, and this is a reflection from I'm forgetting the name, but Professor Nielsen from the Norman Nielsen group about generative AI as a whole new interaction paradigm for humans and machines. So if you think about it, at the start of computing, we had these big one-room computers, and we gave them a set of instructions. So that these punch cards, they basically were programs. And that's how you interacted with a machine. You told them, I think this is what I want you to do, go do it. And then next day, you get the results and they're crap, and you're upset because now you need to fine-tune the program. So your speed of interaction was 24 hours. Even it's quite a brittle type of interaction, right? You have a 24-hour cycle. You need to specify everything correct, and you only get to check at the end. And then you need to adjust everything. When we moved into command-based interactions, so this is the more MS-DOS type of Linux console type of interaction, you have a benefit that after each command, you get some feedback, and you can adjust, and you can try something else. But it's still going to be very strict and very much waiting for you to lead him where you want to go, and it will be sequential. Graphical user interfaces are kind of an evolution of that, but it's still the same paradigm. You give a command, you click a thing, you move the mouse somewhere, and you see the mouse moving, you type. It's the same thing, it's just higher bandwidth and more visual, and affords more flexibility. and more grace in the interaction, you can actually express an outcome based more on intent of what you want to achieve and not of like exactly what you're going to get or even exactly what the outcome is. And you let the machine figure it out. And this is something new. And we're still figuring out how much of that we can do for each use case, how much we need to mix in with a bit of the good old graphical user interface, how much of it is similar to comment-based interaction, and how much of it differs. What I was talking earlier about my own experience of nudging the LLM and giving it feedback, it's kind of like trying to bring it a bit more towards the comment-based interaction type of pattern. I often tell it, don't talk too much, or don't print too much text, or don't move ahead. I have this plan that I want you to generate, but I want you to just give me the outline first so that I validate stepwise before I go deeper. But there are other problems with how to interact with this in this new paradigm. And the most well-documented, and discussed one is the fact that this is a probabilistic system. It's trying to predict the next word, the next token. And I had developers working with me on the product I will tell you about later. And one of their major complaints was, I can't really control the machine. It's non-deterministic and it drives me nuts. Like you can nudge it in certain ways, you can do a lot of things, but sometimes it will pop up with errors. And these errors can be quite severe if you don't account for this possibility. So you had a guy that was citing case law in Canada that did not exist, referencing sources that were bogus, and was caught by the courts and by the judge, and had a great time with that. I actually think that I've seen more than one example of this, because I just saw a YouTube video with something similar. It was not the same name and it was not Canada. So this is happening. Legal is a very interesting area for GPT type applications. And then customer support, although it seems that it makes sense, if you let it to its own devices, if you don't protect the interaction with some technique, you might find that the GPT, the chatbot, is telling customers that, oh, they can actually get reimbursed for something they can't. So giving wrong advice or giving wrong information can put you in a very compromising position there. So then, how do you deal with this? If this is a bit random, and if you want to pursue all the possible outcomes, but you need to address these. One thing that I haven't explicitly put in the slides, but I think it's relevant, is people are starting to learn how these things work. So expectations are already being formed as well that weren't there 2 years ago, 1 year ago. My personal belief is that that will help. So people will know what to expect. And also the societal norm of, if I'm saying, oh, but the chatbot told me this, and then we go check the history and I'm trying to jailbreak the chatbot, trying to force him to give me something, this will become more probably evolve to a place where we as humans agree on what's a normal code of conduct interacting with the machine, and how much was the person at fault or not, how much was the machine properly functioning or not. Having said that, I also believe that to some extent, just by improvements on the foundational layer of the models, some of these things will go away. We saw significant improvements just from switching from GPT-3 to GPT-4 in the particular case I'll tell you about, and some problems that were really hard to avoid, that their occurrence suddenly became much more rare. So I think that to some extent that will happen. But as builders, we still have two essential choices. One is what use cases we pick, and here we have two great options. There are some use cases where there is no wrong answer, or almost no wrong answer. And there are some use cases where errors are easier to spot than others. So these are good variables to have in mind when selecting, is this a good application? Is this a good idea to get into this field? Similarly, or additionally, we can also try to control two things: the input, the prompt, any other inputs that we put into what goes into the model, and the outputs. And this can be controlled by how we design the products. So we can somehow create some safeguards, or we can decide that users will not provide all the information, or we can have different layers of safeguards built in. There are many practices already emerging on how to address this, and also how to filter out outputs. If you want a demonstration of that, try getting ChatGPT to generate you pictures of copyrighted, well-known content, and you'll see that something's in place. Or try to get him to tell you how to build a bomb or any of these things, and you'll see that there are things there that I don't think are being built into the model. They're being built into the architecture around the model. And in the same way, we can build those things into our products. So where are no wrong answers? Arguably, search depends of the type of search. Maybe you can frame the product in a way, or find an area where it's okay if you don't have an answer, or if something doesn't really match. And in marketing and sales in general, I mean, of course, you can send an email that's really outrageous, but this is an area where you have a lot of control, and the fallout is not that terrible if something goes wrong. And then, easy to spot errors. Any workflow where you have a collaboration between human and machine, and it's continuous, is good for applying this type of technology, because the human will keep the machine in check. And this is what you can do in software development with the coding new IDEs, where the machine helps you, but you still are approving things and you're still moving things along. So it's a co-creation between human and machine. And on support, as long as there is a check, or as long as there is some strong safeguards in place. Another interesting way to look at how to deal with emerging technology, whatever it is to look at this idea of what happened when we had the first steamships, or when we had steam power, and we tried to apply it to ships. This was the first iteration. So people put a steamship inside a sailboat. Is this a steamship? Kinda. So basically, you start with no emerging technology. The emerging technology is inside. It's also very, last year we used to say applications would become AI infused. They were all marinating in AI somehow. And then you actually get to AI first, right? Or Steam first. And sometimes you find your icebergs along the way, so it's not guaranteed that goes well. But some examples of few other use cases within specifically within marketing. So this is a recent report of the top use cases in marketing for, they call it here, embedded tool. And you see transcriptions, notes. So basically everybody's trying to bring some sort of copy ideation, content personalization into tools that already exist. So it's things that you're plugging in. It's plugging in the steamship inside the boat. And then when you look at new tools, it doesn't look so different, but there's some variation. But you see that the same use case, you can pursue it in both ways. You can either inject it in within the product, or you can start building a full new product that takes that as the primary experience from the get-go. And it will transform where you arrive in terms of your product design, but it will also probably have more risks. So it's kind of a how do you start type of problem. And coming back to this, to the cost trade-offs, what's interesting is that all of the major models provide some sort of variation of this. Meta, of course, starts on the... Meta is always trying to do things on the cheap. It's the same with the VR, I guess. They start on the lower quality, but always very cheap, very accessible, and they climb the quality ladder a bit slower. And you see OpenAI starts on its pricey and climbs from a different angle. So it's a quite interesting evolution. What we know and what we can expect is that this always tends to commoditization. So even if we might get into marginal gains in how we go up, it tends to become cheaper and cheaper, even if that's not scaling so quickly this year as it was last year in terms of the ceiling of quality. And what we also know is that we essentially have these decent trade-offs where you can get 80-90% of the quality for 5% of the price of the most advanced thing. So it's really about what fits each use case, what degree of errors can you tolerate on use cases. Are you using it for things that have a strong human validation component, or are you using it for things that are supposed to run on their own? And if they fail, what happens? Well, are you liable for something in that case as a product, are your customers? Or is it something where it's fine if it's just a game or it's just something fun? And there are many areas where you can get away with it. All right. So we're getting to the practical case. So at Amplemarket, we basically optimize sales workflows, or better said, we help sales teams win, and we're really focused on generating leads, so outbound, through email, through LinkedIn, also through calls, and a big challenge in this topic, even when you have the best tool and when you optimize all the things and you have the best practices, it's actually the copy. It's actually writing the damn email. And you have teams that are really good, and you have teams that are not so good. And it's something that was really, we knew the best practices, but we couldn't scale in being teachers. We wanted to sell software. We didn't want to sell services of copyright advice. And so we knew that this was a blocker also for product adoption. You need to start planning your sequence of messages to a customer across these different channels, and people would be like, but what do I write, blah, blah, blah. And so we knew that there was potential to transform that experience into something a bit more magical. So it's hard and time consuming to write a good email. It's like that famous quote of, I wanted to write you a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time. It takes time to really get good at this. It's time consuming. If you're looking at people on LinkedIn and you're like trying to sell them something, even if you're an expert in their area and in what you're selling, if you really want to make it personal, it takes you 15 minutes at least, or more, 20 minutes. So it really is an impediment for you to be driving a lot of things and to really perform in the role. And it's why you have so many bad sales emails out there. It's because people just try to automate the most they can out of this, and it's hard to put in the effort for quality. And here, Amplemarket did have two great advantages to tackle this when we saw that maybe this new technology of LLMs can help us, and we might have something that means we can create this with high quality, and it might be something that is not so easy to copy for others. And one is, we know how to write sales emails. We've built on that expertise over time, advising people and just getting good at the craft and knowing everything about the problem. And the other is, fundamentally, we have a lot of access to data. We crawl a lot of information. We get a lot of information from several companies about who that person is, what their company does, all of their LinkedIn profile. We have all of that constantly updated. And as such, we can say, I know who the seller is, I know who the buyer is, I have all their info, I know information about their companies that is not on LinkedIn necessarily, that we get from other sources. How can I use this stuff to write the best message we can? So we set out to map our hypotheses and tackle them in sequence. The first one was, we think GPT-3 can solve this. So we started thinking really seriously about this when GPT-3 came out. It was something that was at the back of our head, back of our mind, like we knew the problem very well. We were trying to solve it with templates, with a number of collaterals and webinars and stuff. But so we knew the problem well, but when we saw this tool, we thought, okay, this might be able to solve this in a completely different way. And it's an actual quite an important thing for us, because it's blocking our customers to adopt, it blocks them to get to success with the tool. So let's figure out how can we play with this and figure out if it works. So we got our internal sales teams, our BDRs, SDRs, the guys that write emails for continuously, and they're always optimizing it and know a lot about it. And we got them to play with GPT-3 and have some sessions with them to learn from them what they thought of the copy, what was good, what was bad, how do they structure copy, how do they think about it, what methodologies do they use, what frameworks, etc. So we learned a lot about copy, and we learned a lot about what we could do with GPT-3, and we connected it to the API. So that was the first step. Then we were creating a prototype. So the first version of the prototype, which is more in the previous step, was just connecting it to an Excel sheet and connecting to the API and making calls from some cells. Then we kind of made that look a little better in an internal tool. So you could put the LinkedIn of a buyer, LinkedIn of a seller, and generate a message. And we gave this tool to our internal team of sellers to go and play with it. And we capture their feedback. And most of the magic was prompt engineering. So the technique of like just figuring out how to tell GPT what to do and just playing with that. And that's what was driving the engineers mad, because it was not predictable what we would get out of it. But just using data and prompt engineering, we actually were able to generate messages that were really good, and that we could actually break it down and see, okay, it's actually better wording, more compelling call to actions. The value proposition is more clearly expressed. The subject line is short and to the point. And unlike what other tools were doing, so this was something that our marketing team then put out to brag in comparing those results. And most of this was because we had the right data points to use, and we were using all that anatomy of a good message, of a good sales message, all that methodological knowledge from our team into the prompts. And then we were just fine-tuning the prompts, and we were doing it based on what usually is called vibes, just what feels good, what makes sense in terms of the output. It took us a while to get rid of, I hope this message finds you well. That was really annoying, and that was one of the things that was driving engineers crazy. And I don't recall precisely if it was with GPT-4 or not, but I think it started occurring much less as well. Okay, so then we created a prototype. So basically, we have a Chrome extension that does a lot of things to help you pull leads, pull people's data from Chrome into our platform. It's kind of like a companion app to Amplemarket's product. And it allows us to do some sneaky things into the LinkedIn page itself. So we just created a button there. So when you see anybody on any LinkedIn profile and you have the Chrome extension active and you're a customer of Amplemarket, you can click a button and it will generate a message inside the UI of LinkedIn. It will just inject those elements there. And we just launched that internally to our sales team. The guys that were doing the heavy lifting of writing emails, but also the guys that would just like reach out to people a bit without all that methodological knowledge, more the account exec type of profile. And we limited what could be used. It was just using whatever is in the profile information section and the tenure at the company. But this was good enough for us to get a good feel for our other assumptions, which was having this more focused. Like there were a lot of tools that allowed you to tell the tool what you wanted in the message. And we said, no, we figure it out. We don't let you control the prompt. We don't let you control how the message output is going to be. Otherwise, you're going to mess up. So we think like this needs to be simple. This needs to be one click. And we also thought the AI is doing a lot of heavy lifting and complexity in the background, but the UI needs to be super clean. And also de-risking this as a first AI product that we were building. And that turned out to be correct. So basically, it was embedded in LinkedIn, as I mentioned, and you could just try another. And then you could not send from here in the first version, but you could click this button to copy the message, send it to the clipboard. And you also had some information about why did I write this? Oh, it's based on their profile. Later on, this was based on company news and linking to the specific news of a funding or some other information and stuff like this. And then at some point we hit that milestone where we decided, okay, now we need to get people using this and checking if we're crazy or not. So we start recruiting early access users and we measure everything. We have some close feedback loops with them on Slack. We had some user interviews. We did some surveys of how happy they were. The most important thing was those buttons. So the button to generate a new copy and the button to send it to the clipboard, the text. And the KPI you see here is how many times do they try another before they press copy. And when we launched, it was about 5. And then it goes about 3 or so. So people start, I think that this drop, I need to check with the dates, but it's GPT-4. At some point, like we launch and then GPT-4 pops up and then gets much better. It's either this drop or this drop. But we were also just refining based on their feedback, figuring out which new data points to add. Not giving them control over data points, but giving them visibility. So we could have more flexibility in the background. And over time, this goes really down, which was exactly what we wanted to achieve. And then the other thing we do is we start measuring another KPI that I don't have here listed, which was what is the distance between the message that they're copying that I generated and the message that they're actually sending for that lead. And then we see, okay, we bucketize that. So we say, how many of them send it with 5% change max? How many of them send it with a larger volume of change? And how many of them change the message completely? So they copied, but it doesn't matter because they didn't use it.
Just
Go ahead.
so if you have access to the changed message, if it was 5%,
yeah,
can you have that put it back to LLM so that he figures out where some errors, not errors, but according to the human.
You could. We didn't go there. So you could do some fine tuning and try to improve some level of additional intelligence layer on top. We just used it, at least initially. I don't know how it evolved in the last year, but initially we used it to pinpoint which type of hooks worked, which types have problems, which type of profiles, which hooks work better on. We also used it to see, is a customer really a fan or not? So we were using it more to understand usage and to understand more generic parameters. We had levers that were more immediate to control than trying to influence the model with the feedback. But in theory, you could. What we could also do, I don't know if we did or not, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was some initiative on this later on, which is just keep the history of what they do send and feed it to them, not in the sense of like what you did wrong, but more of like learning the tone of voice of this user. So we later added some fancy features. So in this stage that I was describing, it was basically one by one. So people were reviewing the messages. In the next version, we basically add the capability for you to just integrate in a sequence of messages that are going to be being sent, messages that are being generated like this for every lead that is there. And then it would give you something that you then review each of those messages before sending, but it's already generating them in batch for a number of leads instead of something that you do one by one. In this version, it was still, you still review them one by one. There were discussions internally of at which point will we give them the option of like just send them automatically. I think that option is now available. I'm not sure how much it is used or not, but it all evolves with what's your base rate of errors and how much confidence people have on this to need or not need that human in the loop review. More interesting even is the second AI product we created. So after the success of this one, and this was a huge commercial success, it was not, it became the new SKU that was added almost on every second contract after we launched it. We really navigated the trend when GPT-3 and then GPT-4 were out, so we were very early to market. And the tools that existed before that were not using this type of LLM in the background were not as good, and they took longer to adapt and adjust. So it really, from that point of view, it was quite successful. Not so much in terms of volume of earnings, but more in terms of creating more lock-in for existing customers and becoming a new extra SKU, a new extra value that we add. But we were not charging a lot for this because, in theory, you could also kind of use GPT on the side and try to reproduce it. The workflow has value in itself, being everything integrated and the data that we bring, that it can be charged more than that. In any case, next product that we worked on was similar to the AI Copilot that you see in Google, that you see in these products these days, Microsoft, etc., but specifically for sales. So we just had basically a retrieval augmented generation type of architecture. So we have a database of if people say this, bring this up. If people say this, bring this up. If people say this, bring this up. And you create all of those cards of objection handling. And then you have a machine that is reading your emails, reading people that are replying to your outreach, to your sales outreach, and they're either, maybe they're not convinced, maybe they're convinced. And the old version of this technology would just say, this one is interested, this one is not interested. The new version of this technology, which is powered by this, is actually place already the next message that you should send in order to get closer to closing the deal. So people only had to go through their drafts in the threads of people that they had reached out to, and they would already have that information. And then over time, you could manage from here. You could see more information about why this message was generated. And of course, for these messages, we were also measuring those metrics that I mentioned of the distance between what is generated and what is sent. And one funny thing that relates with what you were asking, of giving them the feedback of what the person actually sent, the whole thread is part of the context for the message generation. So one funny thing that happened was one of our sales guys was very excited, Israeli, super hyped guy, always a bit on edge, always crushing his quota. And he was like, guys, you made this machine talk like me. How do you make the machine talk like me? What did you do? Like, it was a special feature for me. It's like, and we were like, did we put anything on the setting where we have tone of voice or something? And no, it was not even intended. It was just because it was capturing all the content, and it knew it was this person that was going to write, it was writing on behalf of, it just assumed it. So that was a very neat outcome. So yeah, and then we could basically make this pitch very easily for these products because we could see that we were saving, I think, about 1 hour a day for the people that are managing replies if you have a decent volume. So then you get to a productivity pitch that is very easy to set up and help guide the sale. One comment on this, Salesforce took at least 1.5 years to catch up. So quite happy with that, but it's expected as they're more slow moving as an incumbent. But they did something cute. They created this notion of the thing that is replying is not the actual person. It's this person's AI assistant.
This fully understood before.
So it's like, and I thought that this was super interesting from a usability and just user expectations point of view, which is you're setting the expectations for this might be off. This is a machine that is talking to you. But at the same time, it feels like the send from my iPhone when people started having iPhones. And some people started writing send from my iPhone from their Androids just to look cool. So it kind of makes you also look like, oh, I have I'm using the advanced Salesforce features. So there's maybe that status signaling, but most of all, the transparency signaling of, hey, if this is incorrect, don't get mad. This is this new type of tools that we're all using. So
humanize the AI page. Okay.
Yeah.
It's good.
But if you see the picture, they make it like this doll to kind of, so it's a in between thing. Yeah. As we getting to the end of the talk, so just wanted to quickly mention a few interesting things out there that I recommend checking. This is a very interesting approach to how to do user research. It's not really classical user research. It's mostly desk research based on synthetic agents, synthetic users, making the decisions and talking about something. This is a Portuguese startup. And I think what they're doing is quite interesting and a bit challenging. So a lot of UX professionals get a bit mad. But you can check that they're trying to check the validity of this type of output versus the output of generic user research out there with humans, the classical kind. I don't think it fully replaces. I think that's a bit of a hot take and a provocation, but I think it does help you start thinking about a use case, start thinking about the basic desk research you could do, but format it as if it was user research. So that's quite interesting and can help guide user research efforts. Another interesting one, also Portuguese-based, around marketing. So they're looking to set up, called Dojo, they're looking to set up a whole platform where all of your marketing activities, from the competitive research to the SWOT analysis, all these things that live in different Google Docs somewhere in the organization, actually connect with what your campaigns are doing, with their copy and with what's happening in the campaigns, and that you can see and make all of this flow. It's something that I think it's quite interesting, and it's attacking that area where it's maybe there are no obvious copy mistakes in the copy, but if you tie it to the ads and to somehow a measure of value, because if you tie it to the response to the ads, then you can kind of see if it's performing or not performing, and that would be how you go around. Is it right or wrong in terms of output? And then also super interesting, Opnova. One of the founders is Portuguese, and what they're doing is something super interesting, similar to the type of automation that exists for repetitive tasks already in terms of scripts, but elevating it with generative AI, so that they actually created a whole framework. So you have basically a dumb bot or worker agents that can do this type of things, click on things and execute actions and call things and execute pieces of code. It can take screenshots and it can communicate with the LLM brain. So imagine every step of the way you tell a machine to execute something, and you have a piece that can click things and do things on a virtual machine, but on the other end you have an orchestrating brain that can look at the screens and say, oh no, go back and try to navigate towards the outcome that you stated. So quite interesting, and a huge potential for more complex tasks that are hard to automate and that still have to be carried by auditors, by different teams in IT, and where complex handling might be needed for specific edge cases. In conclusion, I would reiterate my challenge. How might you find the next bicycles of the mind in your area? But yeah, I'm not sure I'll be able to show that the video. Let's see if we get if we're lucky. But basically, it's a famous clip from a guy that advises musicians, basically coaches musicians. And this is this bearded guy on 60 Minutes being interviewed, and he's asked, do you have any talent? Do you do anything? And he's explaining how he adds value without having any specific talents. He says he doesn't have any talent, any technical ability whatsoever. And then the journalist follows up with, then how do you make money? Why do people pay you for? And he says, for my tastes and my unique ability to express my viewpoint. And I find that super interesting, because I think like what we're discussing with how do we manage LLMs, how do we build these products, is like sometimes people say, oh, it's just a thin wrapper on top of the complex thing, but everything you put around that wrapper that seems that it's thin or that you don't have a huge differentiation. 10 years ago, we were talking about just building better products because you make the design better, you make the UX better, and you differentiate through that. So it's kind of the same thing. If you apply a sense of taste and you can have a clear viewpoint and you have subject domain expertise in any given industry, those things are the most important things for successful vertical applications. Not so much being able to train a very specific model necessarily for that area. So that was the point of that video. And to conclude, yeah, I just had the last slide with questions, and it disappeared somehow in my computer. But any questions?
I'd like to know how do you see the future of AI?
So there's multiple angles to it. I think like the commoditization will continue, the costs will continue to go down, and making it more accessible. You have Apple pulling people into the phone and bringing you the AI in the device. You have Meta pulling people into the open source. So you have these different directions. So I think that will push commoditization and pricing to go down. The big question that people are asking around, is there a bubble around this, I think connects more with the amount of money that's being poured into the foundational models. And they're kind of trying to race for artificial general intelligence. I'm a skeptic. I don't think like we'll reach exactly that. And I think that the opportunity is on the specific application level products that can be built, leveraging this as a new platform shift. I really think I haven't seen something in recent years, or even throughout my whole career. I didn't catch the internet shift. I was already kind of born into the internet, or grown into the internet, so to say. But as a working professional, I did catch the mobile wave. So I did see it transform things. I was not riding it, but I saw it. and I have seen how SaaS has transformed how businesses work, and how the transition to cloud has influenced that as well. So I don't think I've seen anything similar to this before, and I've seen a number of trends come and go. I'm skeptical of crypto. I'm skeptical, at least at the stage that it is at, and given the expectations that there were for it, of the evolution of virtual reality and augmented reality. I think it's something that is very clear where it should go, but it's not. It's just not there yet. And with this, I never saw something explode and catch fire like that in terms of a technology. So I think it's just about how can we deploy this correctly? How can we build these small use cases? I think it will be 1,000 of use cases that will make this work. It's not going to be a big transformational thing, but I might be wrong. It can be both. But yeah, I would bet on being involved in this.
Yeah.
Artificial general intelligence, conceptually, I understand the allure, because everything emerges from nothing. Like if you see all these systems where there is some sort of emergence, right? This is just a bunch of things together connecting as a network, and then something emerges from it. But I think it requires a level of complexity that it's probably far from what we have. I think we'll have more useful things faster in the examples I showed you in the next 5 years than I would bet that we would get to AGI. But there's some risk to this bet, right? Because it's a bet where I think, I don't know, but I would say that probably majority of people agrees. A majority of people in the space, I'm not sure, but I would say that AGI is not the one that most people would bet on. But the outsized impact, if it happens, is massive, right? It's a different scale of magnitude. Everything changes. But I don't think it's the thing we should necessarily focus all our attention on, because it's 1% or half of 1% chance event. It does have, if you just compute expected value type of calculation, probably you would focus on it. But that's my personal take.
Yeah, that's my last question. Yeah.
Sure.
Do we need to know the messages, the images made by AI? First of all, do we need to know it or not? The second is how to know it, that message has made by general AI. For example, you show the message, it's there. But
so your question, if I understand, is do you need to make your customers aware that the message is written by AI? I mean, there are some ethical elements to that. Fundamentally, it's up to. I think it makes sense. It's not an easy answer. It's up to you. It depends a lot on context and on the specific case. If there is a human that's taking responsibility for sending that message, so if you're supporting a human that is sending it, I think it is less relevant. If you're the context in which I discussed it was less about the ethical part, and it was more about, do we gain in terms of the experience of the customer interacting with it through the transparency, because of the expectation is set. But there is a more complex question, which is the ethical question. Should people be talking with bots without knowing? It's
someone told me maybe we have to.
I have a feeling that an ethicist would tell you something very strict, but I'm not sure.
Also address the philosophical issues, because there are some.
Yeah.
I don't see many people addressing.
There are more serious issues on the ethical side than that, I would say. There are more grave issues in terms of algorithmic bias. There are things with old school machine learning, what we now feel old school, the mushroom in my slide, right? When you think about, okay, if I just use past data to train a machine into setting apart who's at risk of being in a fraudulent activity and who's not, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen if you give certain elements to the machine. It's going to do racial discrimination. It's going to do a bunch of things that are unethical, unfair, and that need to be mitigated. Yeah.
That is one of the most good questions.
Yeah. So
Because we don't know who is doing that. We know who is, but we don't know really who is.
Yeah.
Being done. That's something very important.
But yeah, from a design element, it's more of an option. From an ethical element, I'm not the most qualified person to answer, so I don't want to give a strict, you should always do it, because maybe it's more nuanced than that. But it's a relevant question. It's things we will have to address. There is a fundamental element to this, which is technically, I don't think it is easy to detect. So I don't think that will be the angle. So
from a more transhuman or social material perspective,
yeah,
you can see that in the well, just.
I think I know where you're going.
For instance, some searches on Google. Google already uses an AI algorithm to tell you the information that you're going to write about. And in the end, you're going to be the author of that paper. But that paper was done from a co-working process between you, Google, maybe Zalando, maybe some of the tools that use AI is the way that they brought you information that you write about.
So who owns the IP?
So who owns where's the authorship?
Where's authorship in this context?
So now it's quite like, because it's so new, I guess, that in the future it's a co-working process in the end.
And if
you don't say in a paper that you write, I did this and I used Google, I also used the laptop and I used this and that. You don't do that. Maybe in the beginning, I don't know.
Yeah.
They used to do that, I don't know.
And
That's a very interesting question.
Guys going to the library and citing
It's almost like
nowadays in your research, sometimes you do so cite the papers that are published, but sometimes you also get so much information from YouTube, this and that, you don't cite all of that there. So, I don't know.
And if you go to ChatGPT and you ask it to generate something that looks kind of like this or that, and some things it will be like very aware of IP, but I got it to generate a version of Obi-Wan from Star Wars by not describing it textually as the thing, but approximately, right? A monk with a laser sword, not a lightsaber. But if you think about it, like some of these things or do something in a cubist style, but if I say in a Picasso, like Picasso, he gets a bit, I'm not sure if I can.
What you said previously, like if there is an interaction with the human, and it's the name of the human, that it's responding, and it's not a human, it's an AI.
If it's automatic, it's one thing, but if the human approves, there is a consent given by the human.
The machine learns from the human. That's already a co-working.
That's a co-working process. Yeah.
Machine, right? So we're facing the early human, early society. They were all cooperative. They had to, because they got to know.
Yeah.
What take you was in, and now we put it on this interaction between AI and humans. We can achieve a lot of these things with that direction. So it's already the same process in another technologies. So it's very curious and it's very interesting.
And an even more provocative thought would be, okay, do we need to reveal that it's a machine? What if machines are prosecuted in the future? Don't they have rights? So then you get to
have influence that will make us human interactive technology as we use today with ourselves.
Cool.
That's one thing.
Yes.
Bring it in your apps. You were going to talk something. I'm not technical at all. I used to be technical.
I'm not technical either.
but one thing I know about agents,
Yes.
it's supposed to be always confidential
Yes.
about this. It's not the future, but it's the next
Yeah.
step, and it's already there. And if you search on YouTube, it's a bunch of people, explaining how to program agents, and it's being seen.
Yeah.
So, because most, from what I understood, I'm thinking about the second app. I guess the first and the second app, it's kind of, and I love that idea because it's really easy. You get, this is the seller, this is the buyer,
Yeah.
this is the prompt, and you just automate this. So
Yeah.
it's kind of using LLM as ChatGPT, but just with a nice interface.
Yeah.
You don't use agents, right? You don't divide like this is, so, and I don't,
Mhm.
you guys are aware of this. So an agent is, you don't, most of this talk was about me asking the ChatGPT and communicating with the guy. So
Yeah.
this is, no, you're going to be my sales guy. This is my company. And you have agency to do whatever according to that. So
So-
it's not like it's an even more vague prompt, right? So they have agency, and then you can have full company where you have a sales force, a marketing force, this is that, and they communicate with each other's and they run the business.
Yeah.
And this is like, I guess it's a new thing.
It's a paradigm, but implementations are.
It's hard.
I think it's hard. I mean, there are some softwares companies that call it an agentic platform, a platform for setting up agents. What we had in that example that I went more in depth was not that exactly. It was much more like the steamboat, to be very transparent. And then the second example, where things are being automated in the background, it's still not agents, but it's more like the steamship already, because the whole thing is designed so that it's not something that you're doing extra on top of the thing. It's something that's the whole workflow flows in that way, I would say. The example I gave, one of the examples I gave with synthetic users. So what you're doing is you're saying, generate me some users that look more or less like this and test this idea with them. What do they think about it? As if it was user research. And so there's a whole part of it that's about creating those personas and then maintaining those personas for the testing sessions. The personas don't have a goal to pursue, and they don't have a lot of agency. They're just being interviewed. So it's kind of an agentic platform, but very narrow in how much agency you actually give the synthetic users or agents, if you will. But they're not issuing commands. They're not doing anything like that. The third thing I showed, or one of the last things I showed, that one I would say, yes, this is an agentic platform. Because what they're creating is, you have that brain. So the brain can run any number of agents, actually. So let's say you have a process for resetting passwords in IT, very typical thing. And somebody needs to go somewhere and reset the password, and maybe they have to deal with some registry with users and accounts, this type of stuff. What you do is you set up the worker bot, which is just inside a VMware somewhere, and is set up there, and it receives the instructions from the agent, right? So the agent is like, okay, the outcome is this, and the steps are more or less this, but the steps themselves are not scripted like what you do with scripting type of automation. So it tells the bot, okay, you need to open Windows, or you need to go to the Windows Start menu to find the thing. I need you to go onto a browser, and then you need to go to this website. So he has some information about where he should go get things, but he also needs to orchestrate the steps that you need to do the thing. So it tells, give me a print screen, show me where you're at. And it shows you that it already has a browser open. Oh, okay, let's just use this browser. And then he says, okay, I want you to input this into the browser. And then it translates into, hey, go there and write at that point of the screen, because it has the screenshot here. It can calculate coordinates visually. So it's a mix of scripting and agentic, because it's making decisions. And I've seen a demo of the product. So let's say it's running that thing, and you go into the VMware and you close the browser. What happens is it takes a print screen at some point of the last action. It goes back to the brain, where the agent is running. The agent goes like, something weird happened. Let's go back a few steps. But that decision to go back a few steps, it's LLM reasoning getting to it. So that is more like the agent that is figuring out what do I need to do next in order to do that. They also have something about assessing the outputs. But essentially, that is closer to agentic frameworks. But I mean, we saw a lot of competitors, going back to the example I was telling you about, the one I was involved. We saw a lot of platforms saying the sales rep agent, sales rep AI, and you would just chat with the sales rep and you tell him everything in, you onboard him and he goes and he sends the emails. They're not really good. I don't know if it was just too soon and you didn't have the right things to build this type of platform. But yeah, it can be, you start adding layers of things that if they have some level of hallucination can introduce issues, and you then need to plan for that. So I think creating this type of platforms, it's harder, and creating those more use cases first infused and then the AI first, it's the path I would recommend for organizations that already have processes, that already have a lot of domain knowledge and can just leverage that to improve the experiences. But it is a wild open space for a lot of approaches.
Sure. Good. Thank you.
Welcome. I think we should wrap. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much. Yeah. All right.
Thank you.